Thank you, Tejan, and thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to talk about things I'm interested and excited about. And as you all know, religion is obviously one of the favorite topics. And as Tejan mentioned, interfaith work and getting together across cultures is a favorite topic. And as he also mentioned, we were privileged to see some things in Turkey a few months ago with Tejan's support and the help of the Pacifica Institute. So I'm going to talk about some of those things today as well. So here's a picture, southeast Turkey. This is a mountaintop. You'll recognize Rabbi Lind. It's a little faint, Tejan. Can we kill a few lights?
No, I don't know which one this one.
That's the wrong one. Much better. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So here's a hilltop in southeast Turkey. That's my wife, Rabbi Linda, sitting there. And it's a hilltop called Göbekli Tepe, which is Turkish for belly hill, or pot-belly hill. And as you can see, the surrounding countryside is kind of flat. And if you just looked at it, you would say, it's a hill with one mulberry tree on top. Doesn't look very exciting. You can see some rocks are stacked up along the side. And the land is farmed, and every farmer comes across rocks, and he takes them out of the field and puts them on the side. Well, the farmer, as he was farming, found some rocks he thought were carved. He called an archaeologist, and the archaeologist said, I think this is a medieval cemetery. And in Turkey, a medieval cemetery is ho-hum, another medieval cemetery. Went away. And he called the second architect, and the architect said, the second archaeologist, and he said, this is interesting. And they've been excavating since 1994, almost 20 years. And as you approach the site, what Linda is holding here in her hand, this little thing you see in her hand, is a Stone Age Neolithic point. It's a sharpened stone. You might use it for carving animals, cleaning skin. It's the standard tool. But it's about 10,000 years old. And they're all over the site. There's things everywhere. And these points, these cutting tools, were used in the Stone Age to make this. So this is the beginning of this site called Göbekli Tepe. It's a truly amazing site in a number of ways, and I'll talk about that. The ancient peoples, the site is about 11,000 years old. It's been dated pretty well by archaeologists. And you know, there's a word, reification. You probably never heard the word reification, R-E-I-F-A-C-A-C-A-T-I-O-N, reification, which means to make real. And the belief is that these ancient people, Stone Age people, had some kind of spiritual notion, some kind of religious concept, some understanding of God, of the divine, that they felt the need to carve into reality. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at, Tejan called it the oldest temple. It's the oldest large-scale construction, and it's the oldest religious structure. So these were hunter-gatherers. These were nomads. This is before civilization as we know it today. So they were not building a city. There were no cities. They were not building a village. There were no villages. They were not building a place to live in. Nobody lived here. There's no evidence of cooking fires and buildings and homes and things like that. But for some reason that we don't understand, they felt the need to build this place. I think it's the start of religion. I think it's the first time anybody built something. And it's a miracle. It's a situation that has all the archaeologists of the world confused, because the common belief was that people first settled down to farm, to domesticate animals, then they began to build homes, then they began to build community buildings, then they created religion. This didn't go in that order. Religion and building this, I'll call it a temple, came before homes. This is before pottery, obviously before writing. So nobody understands how it is that this community came together to build this thing before there was any notion of settled community. Let's look at some more of these pictures. This is a typical kind of structure on the site. There are two T-shaped pillars in the middle, perhaps to hold up a roof. Nobody really knows. Perhaps for some symbolic purpose. Maybe it represented sun and the moon, or good and evil, or who knows. They have found one pillar, which is not yet erected, which is about as much as 30 feet high. The side pillars along the side there are about 10 feet high, and they each weigh from 10 to 50 tons. So they had not yet figured out how to make pottery, but they figured out how to carve and build these things that were 10 to 50 tons each. And they were all carved with the kind of point you saw Linda holding a few minutes ago in her hand. Let me show you some of them. So here's a typical carving on one of these posts. People think this is a crocodile. And this one is what's called high relief style. You can see it's a very 3D kind of sculpture. Why they build this? Were they thinking this is an object to worship? Were they, in some sense, praying to this crocodile? Did it remind them of the soul of some lost, departed person? We have no idea. This is in the low relief style, and it seems to be some birds, kind of like ostriches. Over the thing on the bottom is a boar, a wild pig, perhaps. I leave it to you to imagine what the motivation was to put the energy in to build this, to carve this, to dig out this pillar, move it here, and carve out this sculpture on it. Here's another one. The row across the top looks to me like it's a row of baskets. And I believe they have baskets. I mean, we spent some time in the Amazon, and the Amazon natives can make baskets in about 15 seconds out of leaves from long trees. We've seen longer reeds. We've seen them do that. But below it, it looks like carved ostriches. The bottom, people think, is a scorpion. So again, what was a scorpion symbolize to these people? Was it danger? Was it death? Was it, don't know. We can only guess what they were trying to convey. The basket perhaps is symbols of fertility and plenty. The middle row with ostriches. There probably were ostriches in the area. And it gets more fascinating yet. This one clearly is hands. It's clearly anthropomorphic hands. So were they envisioning some anthropomorphic God concept, perhaps, that came around and held onto the stone? We just don't know. Obviously nothing got written down. The area, this is clearly ducks. And the area at the time, this is in the heart of the Fertile Crescent. I'll show you a map in a few seconds. So the area at the time was a very fertile area. It wasn't until about 8,000 years ago that over-farming drained out, ruined the soil, drained out all the water, became a dry area. And of course today, if you recall that first picture, it looked almost desert-like, and that's because the Ataturk Dam has dammed up the water flow in that area, and it's all channeled through irrigation channels now, and it's carefully managed how they use the water for farming. No natural water. Here's another one. This seems to be a bull, a fox, and a crane, the tall bird. Significance? Don't know. And this seems to be a fox. I love this fox. I mean, it's for 11,000 years ago, it strikes me as an amazingly modern fox. And finally, a lion. And the lion, of course, we all know in Jewish tradition, the Lion of Judah has been a symbol going back to biblical times. Were they envisioning something like that back then? We don't know. Just don't know. So here's the excavation site today. It's a huge site, and it's still ongoing in the excavation. What you see here is covers to keep the rain off in the rainy season and the sun off in the sunny season. The area is, the excavation goes on only about 3 months a year, because it's either much too hot to work or much too rainy to work for the rest of the year, and it does get hot there. I wanted to show you this picture just so you can see what Tejan looks like when he's not dressed up here, but is out in Turkey working. But also to give you some sense of the scale of the expedition. So the scientists believe there are 20 of these circles around the site. And if you look carefully here, you can probably see, am I wired? No. You can see one here, and there's probably one up here, and maybe one over here. And they believe there's 20 around the site. So this distance photograph gives you a little clearer view of some of the scale of this thing. And artists think it probably looked like this. You can see here's 3 of them in the center and more circles around the side. Each of these circles, they think, was a site fully developed like this. So the archaeologist working on this site calls it a cathedral on a hill, and he estimates that it attracted worshipers from as far as 100 miles away. Because people were coming, they found bones of animals. People came bringing food to eat. And there was a lot of game around the area, deer, gazelle, pigs, and geese, which they found in the refuse. But strangely, none of the pictures here depict that. So if you think about the cave paintings, other Stone Age cave paintings, they're typically hunting scenes. They're scenes of hunters killing a deer or killing a pig or something, which you can easily understand as people trying to propitiate the forces and make hunting better. None of that appears here. None of the food animals are on these carvings. We saw some geese, but outside of that. And the second amazing thing is about 8,000 BCE, 10,000 years ago, they buried the whole thing. So these people started this about 11,000 BCE, 11,000 years ago, 9,000 BCE, and 3,000 years later, buried it all. So something changed. Did the religion change? And this was now considered heresy in some way? Did they just lose interest? Did the notion of God change? We have no idea what they were doing, but they did it. So the first point I want to make here is, let's think about religion for a second. Here are people as unsophisticated as you could imagine people being, right? Before writing, before pottery, before agriculture, before domesticated animals, and they felt some religious instinct, some pull, enough of a pull to draw from a community widely held. People estimate this is perhaps a 500-person project to do this labor at any given point in time. So somehow these scattered nomads gathered at this hill and built this thing with some cooperation, some insight, some pull, I'll say some divine pull, if you'll let me, that we just don't understand what it was or what they were doing. And we don't understand how this happened before there was a civilization that domesticated things. So the cathedral came before the village, came before the town, and we don't understand it. So that was about 8,000 years ago. And if you go back about 3,000 years in that area, it was the age of idols. And typical idol, you see these around. This one's a fertility thing, hands over the breasts, held some liquid. Here's another kind of idol. If you love this one, by the way, it's a reproduction. You can buy it online for about 30 bucks. But this is the Fertile Crescent. So if you study the same class I studied, this green area is the area where people think civilization began, and it was in this area that all this was happening. So idols. So we go from the age of Göbekli Tepe, the age of these people feeling some kind of divine pull to build these huge things. I can call them huge idols, if you will. And civilization moved into these hills, into these smaller idols we just saw. So let me look at the Bible. The Bible says, this is chapter 11, verse 27, 28, that the generations of Terah, It's Terach in Hebrew. Some think it should be Tariq in Turkish. That Terach begot Abram. And Abraham, by the way, in the Bible, in case you forget, was not called Abraham in the beginning of the story. He was called Abram. God changed his name a little later. And Terach begot Abraham, Nahor, and Haran begot Lot. And Haran died in the presence of his father Terach in the land of his nativity in Ur of the Chaldees. Next question is, where is Ur of the Chaldees? And scholars, of course, don't agree. Scholars never agree on everything. But at least many scholars think that Ur of the Chaldees is the city of Orpha. And Ur, in ancient tradition, in a lot of languages, meant water, place of waters. So there's many variations on the pronunciation of Ur, and it easily became Orpha. And Orpha, as you would guess, is a city not far from Göbekli Tepe. So I want to advance the idea to you that maybe Göbekli Tepe was the start of religion, and that religious leadership, if you will, prehistoric religious leadership, mapped into becoming the center of idols, and then the center of Abraham. Some scholars disagree, of course, but the Turkish tradition, the Islamic tradition, is definitely that this is, or is the place of Abraham's birth. This is the mosque built over the place of Abraham's birth. And if you can read the fine print here, it says over here, this is the cave where Prophet Abraham was born. So the Islamic tradition definitely holds that this is the place. And what happened in Ur? Well, they didn't stay too long. Abraham was born there, but the Bible says again a few verses later, Terach took his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law. She was not Sarah yet, by the way. She was Sarai, name changed also later. His son Abraham's wife. And they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, but they came to Haran and dwelt there. Well, today, MapQuest will tell you that Haran is about 30 miles from Orpha. It takes 46 minutes by road to drive that. I think it took Haran and Abraham a lot longer than 46 minutes to do that. But it's consistent to say they went from Göbekli Tepe to Orpha down to Haran. By the way, this map says not Orpha, but Shanli Orpha. And about 20, 30 years ago, Shanli Orpha means beautiful Orpha, magnificent Orpha, and the government gave it that proclamation to honor their work in the Turkish battle for independence. So it's a honorific put in front of Orpha by the government. Most people still call it Orpha. So what happened in Haran? What happened to cause Abraham to go? So here we have stories of both the Quran and the Bible. The Quran says, I'm reading the first one here, that Abraham was a man of truth and a prophet, and he said to his father, "O my father, why do you worship that which does not hear and does not see and will not benefit you at all?" And a little later in the Quran, the Surah 21, he says, "I will surely plan against your idols after you have turned and gone away." So he made them into fragments, except a large one among them, that they might return to it and question. Now, if you read only the Quran here, you probably say, huh? What's going on? But anybody who went to a Jewish Sunday school knows the whole story. And the story is that Abraham took a hammer and broke all his father's idols and put the hammer in front of the largest of the idols. And his father came home and said, "What happened here?" And Abraham said, "Oh, the big idol took the hammer and broke all the small idols." And his father said, "Who are you kidding? Idols can't do that. Idols can't move anything." Whereupon Abraham said, "Then why do you worship them?" So that's the Sunday school version of the story that the Quran picks up here as marking Abraham as the transition point from idol worship to a more modern, monotheistic, abstract notion of God. And the Bible tells us that Abraham left God says to Abraham, get out of the country, leave thy family, leave thy father's house, go, I'll show you, and I'll bless you. I'll bless them to bless you and curse them to curse you. And the Quran says the same story. The Quran says we delivered him and Lot to the land which we were blessed for the world. So the story of Abraham from this point on leaves Turkey, makes its way down to what is today Israel, then the land of Canaan. And of course, Abraham, as you know, goes to Egypt and travels around. So let me kind of review the bidding so far. The Stone Age starts something like 5 million years ago and ends, well, Göbekli Tepe was built roughly 9400 BCE. If you're not familiar with the notation, by the way, we use BCE before the Common Era rather than BC because we don't want to sync our time scale to the life of Jesus. It's before the Common Era. And they buried it around 8000 BCE, which is well before the end of the Stone Age. Stonehenge, which we all know about, came 5,000 years later. Young stuff. Pyramids were even later than that. And of course, Abraham, we think, lived around 2000 BCE. Moses, perhaps 1500 BCE. And the temple in Jerusalem was built 900, ended in 70. And after 70, Christianity and Rabbinic Judaism began to emerge roughly 200, give or take 100 years, 200 years. And of course, Islam, as you know, began 600-700 years in the Common Era. I put this chart in because I want you to ask you to think about a few major points. There was a major point around 12,000 years ago when Göbekli Tepe got built. And there was a major point around 2000 BCE, 4,000 years ago, when religion shifted from idol worship, from focus on building these material things to worship, into a notion of monotheism with an abstract kind of thought, the way most of us think of God today, pray today. What happened in the last 2,000 years from this time on? Well, that's been a period of many different kinds of belief in God emerging. Now, there's no standard list, of course, but as you know, the U.S. government, through the Veterans Administration, manages millions of grave sites in federal cemeteries, VA cemeteries, Veterans Administration cemeteries. There's millions of grave sites. And there's a list you can find online of approved symbols that you can use on your headstone at a VA cemetery. And there's about 50 of them. This is about 18 of them I've selected here. We all know Judaism, Christianity, Islam. The fourth one is a Mormon symbol. The sixth one, the A in the middle there, is atheism, which is, they would not say they're a religion, but in many ways they are, my opinion. Some of them, that EK in the bottom is Ekankar, which is about 40 years old as a religion. Many versions of Christianity. So there are, since the Catholic Church, since Martin Luther in 1517, there's many varieties of Christianity. I'm not an expert on Islam, but we all have heard of Sunni and Shia and Sufi and Alawite. And I'm told there's 4 main bodies of law in Islam. So there are varieties. There's enough differentiation in all the religions. Some of you heard Rabbi Rockwell's talk last year about the variety of Jews in the modern world. Each of us has many different religions. But there's a new phenomenon emerging. And it's called the rise of the nuns. And this illustration was stolen from Time magazine last March. And Time magazine was commenting on the fact that people do surveys of what is your religion. And the fastest growing answer is none. Fastest growing answer. And what this chart they put out is trying to say is that it's not that none means I don't do anything, I don't believe anything. It's that none means I don't find it in the big organized religion. I find it in some kind of personal search. So groups are organizing in somebody's home in a facility like this and doing religious services and saying, we've got our own way of doing it. So in some senses, we're going back to Göbekli Tepe, where people were saying, we feel some pull of the divine that we're going to worship our own way. We're going to do something. It's unmediated pull of the divine. And they may not find it in the structure of a major organization because those are limited how somebody else said you should find God. And people are finding God their own way. So this is, I think, the next major development. The understanding that every individual experiences the sense of the divine, the voice of God, in a different way. And the world is changing. Individuals are developing with different backgrounds, experiences, and thoughts. We should not expect that one size fits all. So the idea is emerging that your ideas and your beliefs and your practices are right for you, may not be right for me or for each other. So certainly the Göbekli Tepe were not bad people. They were the leaders in a time period, and you might say they were very committed religious volunteers to a religion that had not yet been defined. So Islam has a word for this, and if I got it right, Tejan, it's ijtihad. Is that close?
Yeah, ijtihad.
Ijtihad. So ijtihad, the dictionary definition is, it's the making of a decision in Islamic law by personal effort, independent of any school of jurisprudence, as opposed to following the decisions of an expert. So it's to go back and re-examine. And as Fethullah Gulen uses it, he says it's a proper intellectual and spiritual study. Right? So it's the idea which is emerging in the people who are not affiliated, as well as in many of the organized movements now, of re-examining fundamentally for ourselves what are our intellectual roots of religion and what is our spiritual understanding and calling. And Gulen, of course, talks about this as an aspect of tolerance. His advocacy is that we should have such tolerance that we're able to close our eyes to the faults of others, to have respect for different ideas, and to forgive everything that is forgivable. So I would never say to somebody, you're doing it wrong in your religious practice, right? Because you're doing it wrong as the result of your spiritual motivation, your intellectual thinking, who you are. It may not be the way I do it, but Gulen says I should understand the different ideas. Why do you practice differently and think differently? And even if what you do strikes me as offensive, I should forgive what's forgivable. Rabbi David Rosen has written things that are quoted in some of Gulen's books, and he said it this way: we should indeed keep the differences and learn to respect them. Nobody's advocating one religion for the whole world, but rather say each religion has its own approach to God, and indeed each individual has their own approach to God. But we also have a universal dimension, a dimension that we can share and emphasize in the universal. This kind of thinking, have any of you heard of Claremont Lincoln University? So Claremont Lincoln was founded by Claremont School of Theology, but with the support of the Lincoln family, who said, we all share some things like, for example, the Golden Rule. Why aren't we marketing that? Why aren't we developing that in lieu of developing hatred? So they built an organization, Claremont Lincoln University, which is based on the campus of the Claremont School of Theology. The Academy for Jewish Religion in California, which is my seminary, is a key supporter of this activity. There's a Beyond Claremont now representing the Islamic movement. There are affiliations with Hindu and Jain and other religions emerging. And by the way, Pacifica Institute is officially a partner in this activity, to provide a common place where we can learn our own religion strongly, but also learn about each other's religions and understand what the differences are, what the ideas are, and how we strengthen that. So how do you summarize this? I want to conclude, at least time for discussion, that I'm Jewish, I'm a rabbi. So where do you go to summarize? You go back to Torah, you go back to the Bible. Where else can you go, right? And I want to give you this line that I use a lot in working with, as some of you know, I spend a day a week as a chaplain in jail along with Rabbi Linda. And I frequently use this line in our ministry there. And early on in the Bible, the Bible says, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. So the teaching is that all of us are created in God's image. I can't look at anybody and say, bad. I'm going to say, God's image. Islam teaches, if I know this correctly, to say it is God, the one. We're saying the same thing. All of us are God, the one. And by the way, God and Allah, interchangeable language question. If you'd rather say it is Allah, the one, everything I said about God is Allah. So everything in the world comes from God, comes from Allah. And all of us come from God. The Quran has 2 creation stories. The Bible has 2 creation stories. They both have a story of creation from clay. In the Quran, there's a creation from water, which is symbolic of spirit, of spirituality, of God's presence on earth. In the Bible, the second creation story is this one. God made man in his own image. So I think, and the Talmud, the Jewish traditional law, traditional writings, teachings, teach that even though all of us are descended from Adam and Eve, each of us is unique. That part of the miracle of God's creation is he made 2, and the rest did not come out like coins, all the same. We all came out different. We all came out unique. And that uniqueness continues to show how we connect with God, how we understand God, and each of these ways are ways of God, and we must respect it and learn from it. So I think, in a sense, our challenge for the next decades, the next 100 years, is to recreate the Gobekli Tepe understanding of a communication with God, and understanding that we're going to do godly things, each in our own way, and bring that interfaith thinking together to understand the points of view, and come back to build a religion of the next couple of decades. That's the end of organized thought, so thank you.